Today, we'll be looking at an important setup in the extrusion line process, and it's the dual coil pay-off and take-off point. This is essential for a continuous and efficient wire or cable production. So, for an efficient and a continuous wire and cable production, a dual pay-off and take-off point is an important setup in the extrusion line process. Because if our extrusion line process should stop for 1 minute, you wouldn't like it, because one, it's to generate waste, because for us to get another molten PVC for the extrusion, it will take another time to breed the extruder in order to generate a molten PVC. So we wouldn't want that wasting of resources. So because of that, this dual pay-off and take-off point will help us not to observe or to encounter such during our extrusion line process. It helps our extrusion line process not to get halted. So with this dual take-off and pay-off point, we can be able to run an efficient continuous wire or cable production. And understanding how this works, it will help us to prevent this downtime and also to maintain a high production speed during the extrusion line. So take a look at the pay-off and the take-off point. So here you can see this is a cone pay-off point. This is a cone pay-off point. We have other pay-off points. We have the basket pay-off point. We have other pay-off points, but for this particular extrusion line process, we are using the cone pay-off point, and this is our take-off point. It's still a dual take-off point. So at this point, we're also making use of two reels. So that's why we call it the dual pay-off point and the dual take-off point. That helps us to maintain an efficient and a continuous wire or cable production. So follow through the end of this class and to learn how this dual pay-off and dual take-off production point works. Let's start from the pay-off point. What is a pay-off in cable extrusion? What is a pay-off? Okay, a pay-off is the equipment that releases the wire or cable into the extrusion line. It is where the process begins. So our pay-off is that equipment that releases the wire from the reel. It releases the wire from the reel, and it feeds the wire into our production line. It feeds the wire into our production line. It releases this wire from this reel, the reels, and then it feeds it into the production line for extrusion line process. So the pay-off is that equipment at the start up of the extrusion line process. That is where our extrusion line process starts. So that equipment that releases the wire from the reel, and then it feeds it into the extrusion line process or our production line. That is what we call pay-off. It have different designs, different shape, different styles. So, but no matter the style, just know that at that starting point where our wire is being released from that starting point and is now being fed into the production line, that is what we refer to as pay-off. So now we're talking about a dual pay-off. You know dual now? Dual means two. That means at this point now we are using two of this equipment to feed the wire into the production line, our extrusion line. So we are using two of this equipment to feed this wire into the production line. So, and this allows for continuous feeding of the wire into the line without stopping. It allows it. With this dual equipment, we can feed in our wires continuously into the production line until you are done with your production for that day or for that moment. So with this dual coil pay-off, we can run a continuous production line until we are done with the number of cables or the quantity of cable you want to produce for that time or for that day. One coil or reel, you can either call it a coil or the reel. One coil or reel pay-off, while the second is prepared. What do I mean? One of the reels, remember we are talking about dual coil pay-off. So one pays off, like one is feeding into the production line, while the second one is being prepared, is being kept and for getting ready for an automatic changeover. And this machine automatically switches to the second coil once the one that is paying off, the one that is feeding into the production line, once it finishes, it automatically switches to the second one. How do we achieve this? One, the inner end of the reel, the one already feeding into the production line, the inner end, the tip of that reel, of that wire, sorry, the inner end of the wire is being tied to the outer end of the one prepared, waiting for the switching that we use to switch over. So that the inner end of the one feeding into the production line is tied to the outer end of the one prepared, waiting to be changed once the one feeding into the production line finishes. So immediately that one feeding into the production line finishes, it automatically switches over to the second coil, and that one automatically starts feeding into the production line. So once that one starts feeding, then you now say, okay, this one now is the one that is now the coil that pays off. Then you bring another coil and also you keep that one prepared, waiting for this one that is feeding into the production line. Once it finishes, before it finishes, you've already noted that one, the inner end to the outer end of the one kept prepared. Once this coil finishes, it automatically switches over to the second to the prepared coil, and to start feeding into the production line. So this dual coil pay-off, it allows for a continuous feeding of the wire into the production line without stopping. It allows it, that's how it continuously feeds into the production line without halting. With this, our production line doesn't get halted, which will cost us time. It will generate waste in bringing the production line again, the PVC again, to be in a molten form. So with this, I believe you understand, one, that this dual coil is the equipment that releases wire into the production line. and it allows for continuous feeding into the production line. So this is what a dual coil payoff means, and this is also from today's class we also learned how it works.